And now we welcome you to the portion of Liberty Nation Radio, which we entitle Talkin' Liberty. Makes sense, doesn't it? As we welcome in our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Tim, it makes sense to me. I love talking liberty with you.
Well, indeed, and we're going to do that again today. And Scott, I always like these discussions we have when they start with effects on liberty that the average person experiences almost on a day-to-day basis. And most people, or many people, drive, and there's a couple things regarding the things people don't like when they drive that are among the stories we're going to cover today. And we start in the bastion of liberty known as Oregon, where a federal judge has cleared a red light camera critic. The story doesn't actually involve the camera so much as the critic, but what the heck? It's a twofer, isn't it?
It is a twofer. It's a great story. And to coin not to belabor the point, but where the rubber meets the road, Tim, for so many Americans, their interaction with the state occurs at the wheel of the car. That's where they're pulled over, where searches are done, where oftentimes rights are implicated and violated by the state. So that's why there's so much law there. And you're right. I do like to kind of bring it home because that's where so many people can relate to these government overreaches. So the hero in this story, Tim, is Mats Jarlstrom. He's an engineer, and he lives in Oregon. And he wrote a letter to the state Institute of Transportation Engineers, because he was mad that they produce dangerously short yellow times for their red light cameras. And as you might imagine, Tim, that produced more violations and more revenue for the state, right?
Certainly you're not suggesting that was the intent, Scott.
I haven't. God forbid, Tim. No, let's not.
Of course.
Let's veer off into that.
Clear here. Yes.
Yeah, let's not veer off into that territory. So he wrote them a letter, and he said, protesting this improper engineering, and he indicated that he was an engineer when he signed that letter. Well, boy, I'll tell you, the state doesn't like it when you challenge them. And the Oregon State Board of Examiners for Engineering and Land Surveying saw his email and decided to fine him for $500 for the crime of practicing engineering without a license. Now,
I'll tell you what, he could get a mass of people to protest on his behalf. A mass of people.
He is an engineer, just to be clear. He's not a professional engineer licensed by the state of Oregon to sell his engineering services, right? So, but he wasn't, again, selling anything. He just signed his own letter of protest with his own credential. So anyway, he sued, and it's a great judgment, Tim, whereby the U.S. Judge, the magistrate judge Stacey F. Beckerman, did the right thing and stripped the Oregon State Board of Examiners for Engineering and Land Surveying's power to punish people who call themselves engineers without paying the government. They can't call themselves professional engineers for hire, right? But if you are an engineer, and if you think, Tim, there's all kinds of engineers. There's software engineers, right? I mean, that's an engineer.
As long as you don't ply your trade in a way that upsets the people at the top of the power structure.
Or complain when they try to get their pound of flesh from you.
Indeed. Now, staying with the whole traffic thing, speaking to drivers, a federal court has upheld a traffic stop over a fast blinker.
Well, that's right, Tim. I think this is a sad case because the person was operating their vehicle within the bounds of the law, operating their blinker within the bounds of the law, but the law requires it to be in good working condition. Well, sometimes, because of some electrical system issues, a blinker can go into a fast blink mode. Well, that still tells the other drivers that you're indicating a turn or a lane change, right? And that's the purpose of a blinker. Well, the court ruled here that it was okay for the cops to pull over this car, and they will use anything is the point of the story, Tim, to be able to pull somebody over. And let's think about how
they'll always find something, right? I mean, because there's always some kind of violation going on in every single vehicle on the road if they look hard enough for it.
If you have to travel more than 20 feet, you're darn right, Tim. And you have to think about how invasive it is when the police pull somebody over, how ruinous it can be to somebody's day. It's not okay for state agents to seize members of the public absent a compelling reason. And it's, I think, pretty disappointing that the 11th Circuit here says that a fast blinker is a compelling enough reason to seize the citizenry.
Well, Scott, certainly you're not trying to drain the coffers of the police department and the politicians who grant them funding.
Certainly.
But we'll give you a pass on that one and move on to another First Amendment issue, a lawsuit for professors at Chicago State University. God forbid they criticize the administration. You can't do that, Scott.
That's exactly right. And that's why the blog on which they were criticizing them was ordered shut down after the administration decided, well, in the delicate balancing test between Philip Beverly and Robert Bionaz's First Amendment rights and the administrators being free from criticism they disfavored, they waited on the side of being free from criticism. So they did shut down that blog, and those professors recovered $650,000 and an agreement to not continue this sort of thing. And Tim, I think it's really great. This is part of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education's litigation project called Stand Up for Speech litigation project. We talked about it before when it launched, and this is another pelt on their wall of a university who they've sued for these speech violations, and they're continuing to do it.
And I think that this kind of action and this kind of decision will make others in the future think twice, make other college administrators in the future think twice about when they try to suppress any criticism of their actions. Now, this next one, I have to admit, I was a little reluctant to talk about this because I thought I'd kick the tongue twister in it, but this is about a federal judge in Iowa. Let's see if I can get this right. Striking down Iowa's ag-gag law.
That's right. You got it. And that's agricultural the gagging of people who want to report on agricultural, what's the right word here? Mistreatment of animals or treatment of animals that looks off-putting. And oftentimes what they would do, Tim, is this is a sort of the animal freedom type people go on to animal treatment processing centers or farms where they hope to capture on video horrible treatment of animals, which they can then use to denigrate animal production and consumption generally, and also the specific instances of abuse that they witness. And they actually got the state of Iowa to create a crime called agricultural production facility fraud. It's pretty fantastic that one class of people didn't like the speech of another class of people. Now, there are civil remedies for somebody who videotapes, on your private property without your permission, right? But that's not what happened here. It's sort of a private criminal law was created. In any case, you can imagine the First Amendment implications, prior restraint implications here are pretty massive. I was always shocked that it took this long, Tim, for the law to get stricken down. But stricken down it was. A federal judge in Iowa basically granted the Animal League Defense Fund, one of the plaintiffs, the ruling. And they said in the ruling itself, the nation well knows that one of the costs of the First Amendment is that it protects the speech we detest, as well as that which we embrace. So a lesson there for Iowans who don't want certain speech to go forward.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio, and LibertyNation.com's own podcast, The Uprising, hosted by me and Scott and Lisa K. Donner, are available to you on demand anytime, anywhere at LibertyNation.com, and, of course, from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying stand up for liberty, and we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.